Welcome to Understanding Accreditation as it pertains to curriculum selection. The goal of this workshop is to demystify the word accredited and to talk about the pros and cons of choosing an accredited resource for your homeschool. But first, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tam, and I have been homeschooling my 3 kids for the last 10 years. Right now, my kids are in 3rd, 7th, and 10th grades, and we are from Georgia. Before I was homeschooling them, I worked in college admissions at 2 of the top universities here in Georgia. And so that's what actually kind of led me down this path of wanting to better understand accreditation for myself, because I, like many people, had this thought process of, well, if it's accredited, it must be good, you must be doing all right. Or if you're not using an accredited curriculum, then you must be doing something wrong, right? Not exactly. We're going to get into that. First, let's just talk about what is accreditation. Accreditation is a quality assurance process that verifies if an educational institution meets recognized standards. It pertains primarily to schools and not specifically to curriculum. Now, what that means is when someone is talking about or asking the question, is something accredited, they're basically asking, has someone come in and looked at this and given it the thumbs up? Well, that typically only happens when there is a school or a facility that is seeking this accreditation, and not so much when someone develops a curriculum or an educational resource. The thing about being a homeschooler is you can use many different types of educational resources without necessarily having someone come in and give it a particular stamp of approval, even if that resource has been made by qualified educators. Because the process of seeking accreditation is checking for more than just, does the curriculum align with standards? They're checking on different processes of how the school is being managed, the facilities, the instructors. There's a lot more that goes into the accreditation process that does not specifically pertain to curriculum. So if you want to think of it as just in a short, sweet way, accreditation is validation plus confidence. That's what accreditation boils down to for those of us who are seeking it or who are interested in it or who want to have the resources that we are using be accredited. We are seeking that validation that comes from someone else coming to check in. And it gives that boost of confidence of like, okay, something that I'm using has had other eyes on it than just my own. Accreditation is not abracadabra, you've done everything right. We cling to the word accreditation like a security blanket because we're so terrified of failing our kids, right? And we think if something's accredited, we're at least doing a good job in that category. And while that might bring some comfort that something is accredited, I want you to understand that something being accredited does not guarantee any one particular outcome. So in a previous video, I used an analogy to compare schools to restaurants. Sticking with that same analogy, curriculum would be the menu of a restaurant, while accreditation would be like the food inspector of that restaurant. The food inspector can't tell you if the food is good or if it's going to meet the dietary needs of your family. What a food inspector does is they let you know that the floor is clean and the processes being used to prepare the food they meet the industry standards. That's what a food inspector does. That's what accreditation does. An accreditation stamp on a curriculum on a school cannot tell you that your kid is going to be successful in this school. It can simply tell you that the curriculum they're using aligns with state standards, the instructors have the correct credentials, the facility, if the school is in person, the facility is safe and meets all the safety standards that are required, that sort of thing. It does not guarantee any particular outcome. Accreditation does not mean your kid is getting into college. Accreditation does not mean that the resource is better than a non-accredited resource. One example of a non-accredited resource that most everyone would agree is a pretty good one would be resources like Khan Academy or IXL or PBS Learning Media. These are educational resources that are used in public, private, charter, and homeschools all across the country, but these are not accredited resources. Why? Because these are not schools. Khan Academy, while having the academy in the name, is not a school. PBS Learning Media, while being used in just about every type of learning environment you can think of, is not a school. PBS is not a school. And IXL, again, educational resources that branch off from IXL include websites like Rosetta Stone, education.com, ABC vocabulary.com. But these are not schools. They are resources and they are not accredited. So when someone is asking you that question, is what you're using accredited? One of the things that you have to remind yourself is if it's not a school, chances are it's not accredited. However, there are certain special recognitions a curriculum company can seek for their program without having to formally establish a school. One example of those would be Me Academy's K through 8 program is accredited as a supplemental education program by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, but that does not in and of itself make it a school. It's just the program has gone through that additional special accreditation process. Now, one thing that I will also want to point out is a lot of times a curriculum company, the ones that make the curriculum, they will go ahead and establish a virtual school. And I've got some examples here that I'm going to read off for you guys just so you can see what I'm talking about. So I mentioned Me Academy already. They have a curriculum path that you can choose as a parent for your kid that's $36 a month. That's the Me Academy portion. They also have Mia Prep, which is their high school that you can do separate of their curriculum for $48 a month. But if you want their accredited school, if you want to do that version, their accredited version, which is called Mia Prep Online High School, and that's accredited again by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, that option would be $480 a month. Time for Learning is another curriculum choice that I'm familiar with. It's what my oldest daughter uses. That runs at about $40 a month for the 6th through 12th grade program. But if you wanted to do the accredited version, which they call Bright Spire Virtual School, and that school is accredited by Cognia, which is also the same organization that accredits that does the accreditation process for a lot of the schools here in Georgia. That would be $4,280 per year at the time of this video, of course, which is approximately $356 a month for their accredited option. And then there's also Power Homeschool is another popular homeschool option that allows you to do their curriculum for $31.25 per month. But if you wanted to do their academy, which is called Acellus Academy, that would start you at about $250 per month, up to $499 per month for their premium option. Again, that's all at the time of this recording. And I don't think I said, but Acellus is accredited by the same organization that Me Academy is accredited by, which is the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. So when you're talking about which is better or which should you use, it's really all boils down to it's your choice. What do you want to do? What are you seeking? You have to consider what benefits are you getting from an accredited school that you may not get by going it your own if you chose to do just the curriculum path or just the educational resources path. Typically, when you go the accredited path, you are getting all the paperwork done for you. So we're talking about your transcripts, your record keeping, your diploma, assuming you chose to go all the way through with the high school option. Typically, under an accredited option, if you needed credits to transfer, for example, if you thought you might be going back to public school or you might transfer to a private school, or you're just not sure if the homeschool situation is going to last all the way through high school, then having the accredited option would it's more likely that your credits will transfer easier, maybe with a little less paperwork than if you just did the curriculum option where you may have to sign an affidavit or show samples of work to show that your resources that you are using meet the standard that the school that you're transferring to is looking for. So that might save you some paperwork in that regard if you have transfer, if you end up needing to transfer. Another reason that accreditation could be helpful is it could potentially save you time if you are looking for your kid to have access to instructors or perhaps even some live courses or meetings with educators. That typically comes along with an accredited program because the school is offering you access to educators, not just the curriculum. So some of the pros of an accredited homeschool resource or an accredited homeschool program would be quality assurance, in that accredited programs are checked by an education authority to ensure they meet certain standards. They also tend to have a standardized curriculum, meaning the accredited programs are following a set standard. I already mentioned, but accredited programs tend to lead to a high school diploma should you choose to complete the program. Usually they are meeting the standards for most states. You're going to want to follow up on that just to make sure that the program that you've chosen is going to meet all the standards for your states for high school graduation, but they typically do. And then when it comes to college admissions, again, it typically streamlines the college admissions process because you're not necessarily having to show samples of work when you are ready to submit your application. They are just trusting that accredited program meets the standards. And even on some college admissions websites, they'll tell you which accrediting agencies, like which regional accreditation offices they accept. And so Western Association of Schools and Colleges is a pretty popular one. Cognia is another very popular one. So if you're using programs that are accredited by these agencies, you're probably in good shape. All right, and then when it comes to state requirements, if you live in a state that requires you to submit portfolios or those sorts of things, using an accredited program usually also makes that process just that much more simpler because, again, there's that embedded trust that goes along with using an accredited program. Now, what are some of the cons? One of the cons that I've kind of already hit on or I've alluded to by just giving the examples is the cost, okay? It costs a lot more to go with an accredited option than if you were to simply use the curriculum option. Also, there tends to be less flexibility when you're using an accredited option because there's going to be deadlines. Your kid will have to submit work by a particular time, as opposed to if you were just using the curriculum option where you can decide when the deadlines are. When you're working with an accredited option, when you're working with a live class, you tend to lose a little bit of that flexibility, and you also tend to lose a bit of that control over whether you want to, what order you want to do things in. For example, you might have to submit things in a particular order at a particular time. Another option, or another, I guess, con to accredited programs is a bit of that loss of innovation. What you gain in standardization, you lose in innovation. So if you wanted to be able to present a topic to your kid in a more innovative way, you may lose that opportunity with the standardization that comes with accreditation. Again, it comes down to personal choice. You don't have to necessarily be all or nothing. You can have an accredited option and then do some more innovative things on the side. But I just wanted to present that as, like, you may lose some of that flexibility. You may have, that may be something to consider when you're determining your why. Now, personally, when it comes to accreditation, I tend to think of it as something that's not necessary until high school years. But again, if you're living in a state where you have to submit more documentation of your homeschool process, and it would just make you feel better, like personally make you feel better, to be using an accredited resource when you go to turn in your information, then by all means you can do that. But I will tell you from my experience as a college admissions counselor, when it came down to the admissions process, we were not looking at anything that happened before the 9th grade years. And so for that reason, that is why I tend to not prioritize accredited information or accreditation in general for the homeschool resources that I'm using for my kids until the high school years. Hopefully that was helpful. I know with things being on TikTok, we try to keep things a little bit more condensed in terms of time. So if you have any questions about accreditation, please feel free to leave them in the comments below and we can start a conversation about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in my next workshop.